Tonight's guest is John Butcher. John and his family have been with us at Westwood Community Church for about 15 years. John is currently the president and CEO of Caribou Coffee that's based out of Minnesota homegrown company. And before Caribou, John had a 20-year experience with Target in leadership. And one of the things that I know about John is that he's led through multiple crises and has just compiled time-tested wisdom that he's going to make available to us tonight so that we can take from this conversation and go apply it right away to where we lead to. So John, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're really grateful you're here.
Hey, Brian. It's good to see you.
So let me just start with kind of a first question. I know for me personally, when this started to hit, not only orienting myself to COVID and the impact and what to do next, but I was starting to ask the question, okay, what are the most important actions that I can take as a leader right now? So when we're faced with crisis, what are the most important things that a leader can do first? And where does it go from there?
Well, I'll tell you, before you do anything, just take a deep breath and remember that you're not in this alone. So Proverbs 3, 5, 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. We have family, we have friends, we have teams, we all have a lot of networks, and no matter what you're leading and what you're leading through, that personal network is outstanding, but more importantly, we have our Heavenly Father. So pause before you see a crisis or as it's approaching. Sometimes it's a steamroller and sometimes it's a freight train, but there's always time for that. But then you got to lay the groundwork and realize that you're actually in a crisis. And the first stage of crisis is urgency. And there's 4 things that I kind of think about when we know that a crisis is either approaching or has already begun. And the first that's really important for us all to do is to just call a crisis a crisis. Don't sugarcoat it. Be really honest, be really transparent. It's hard because I think a lot of us are nurturers, and as leaders, people think we all have the answers and hey, what do we do now? What do we do next? What's happening? Is it going to be okay? We don't always know, but what we can acknowledge is something's happening. And the reason it's so important to just let people know, hey guys, I think something's happening and it is a crisis, is because people have to immediately change behaviors. What was important last week, what was important last month, whatever goals you have set for the year, they might no longer be important, and you might need to go into a completely different mode as a team. You might have to start saving money. You might have to develop new capabilities. You might have to start immediately taking care of people differently. But you can't do that without just being honest with what you know, what you don't know, and calling a crisis a crisis. And I actually think Governor Walz has done an outstanding job of doing that throughout this whole coronavirus. He's gotten up and he's said, here's what we know, here's what we don't know. Folks, this is serious. And I've been really impressed with how he entered into that very first stage and just kind of owned the fact that a crisis was underway. Secondly, though, in that first stage is get the facts, ask a lot of questions, listen to people, listen to all the information that you have, and then act. Don't overreact and follow someone else's playbook. You know your team, you know your brand, you know your family, and you can't move forward and do what's best for your people by following someone else's playbook all the time. So, at Caribou, if we would have just done what other companies would have done, we would have closed. We would have closed our doors instantaneously. But we talked to the state, we talked to health officials, and we were quickly told, please stay open if you can, and here's why. And so we listened to that. We tried to honor that. But I tell you, those first stages of crisis are so chaotic. Information's flowing so quickly. It's hard to have the discipline to say, let's pause, let's get the right people around the table, let's gather all the information that we possibly can, and then let's start to come up with a playbook. Next, in that third kind of phase is I look at ensuring roles and responsibilities are really clear because they might be different for people than than normal. So I'll give you a quick example. If you look at the way that most corporate leadership teams are formed, people have very defined roles. You know, you're the CFO, you're the chief legal counsel. Well, in the middle of a crisis, you might need different things to be taking place. And you know, we not only defined exactly who was doing what within the first few days, but we had to make a couple of tweaks to say, hey, normally you do this. Now we need you to do that, at least for the time being, because this is what the team and the business might require. But making sure people are clear, because it really stinks. No one likes to come to work if they don't really understand what's expected. And in the middle of a crisis, you don't really know. Am I supposed to keep doing this thing? Is that still important? Do I still run that report? Do you guys still want that update? Is that initiative I was working on still relevant? The answer might be very well yes, and the answer could instantly be no, stop doing that. Don't waste your time on it anymore. So role clarity becomes really critical in that first stage. And then if you can, the fourth thing I think about in that first phase is trying to create a really common set of understanding for how decisions are going to be made in this phase of operations. So one of the things, for example, that I communicated to the team pretty quickly after my team and I discussed is we said, hey, at Caribou, during this crisis, there's going to be 4 things that are going to guide our behaviors, our decisions, our expenditures, everything that we do. And that's going to be team first, guest second. We're going to be looking at our future because we don't want to lose sight of the fact that this brand has been around for 30 years. We want it to be around for 130 more. And then lastly, our business health, so that we can continue to maintain our ongoing operations and have cash to support all the people. So we made it very clear. These are the 4 filters. If you're working on something that doesn't clearly align to one of those things, then bring it to your leader and talk about it, because it might not be important right now. And if you were wondering, then yes, this actually is a prioritized list. It's team first, guest second, future third, business health fourth. Knowing that the things that normally matter for us might be very, very different now.
John, how did you go about identifying those 4 in particular?
Well, I'll tell you, at Caribou, it's easy because everything's people. We're a culture-based company, but we knew that team is something that we've been prioritizing now for a couple of years. So it was easy to keep team in the pole position for us. Our guests and our team needs are often very similar, especially in this particular crisis that has to deal with health. We know that we need to keep our team safe. We know we need to keep our guests safe. So we knew that keeping them 1 and 2 where they always are was going to be really critical. But interestingly, you know, it's very stressful on a business to go through crisis like this. That's why so many are failing, so many are closing, so many had to furlough 100% of their team or 90% of their team. We know that 50% of businesses have furloughed people, and the question is to what degree? And so our goal was to protect people as much as possible, even if it was going to mean the business was going to take a real hit to profitability. So that was how we looked at it. Was the business needs to be healthy enough to support that team. Kind of becomes a cycle. With open hands you give, with open hands you receive. And that's when we start to draw that out. That's exactly how ours works. It's team, guest, future, business health. Team, guest, future, business health.
That's helpful. It sounds like that's really influential from just pre-existing values. You go back to your values.
Yeah, you know, we say a lot that culture eats strategy for lunch, and there's a lot of times that your culture gets pressure tested, and in our industry, it happens every single day. We have our baristas, our team is just an incredible group of people, and And when I try and get behind the line at one of our stores, I usually get in the way and I make a fool of myself, as much as I've tried to learn. But if you have good cultural values that can step in and drive the business forward, it's amazing how they shine during moments like these. And that's really what's happening for the most part. There's obviously some exceptions.
Yeah, good. Thanks for that. And again, for those of you who are joining us tonight, you can submit a question at the bottom in the Q&A tab. And as we have time towards the end of our webinar, we'll have an opportunity to address some of your questions. Kind of the second part. So when you're in the middle of a crisis, for however long that it takes, I think we're in the middle of it. We might be in the very, very beginning of it. None of us know right now, especially in COVID-19. But the question that I have for you is, what are the different disciplines as a leader that are mission critical?
Yeah, this is an important phase, because once you leave, the urgency of the initial stages of a crisis are starting to subside, you transition into the second phase of crisis management, which is really about stabilization. Just trying to get your team, all the people around you, trying to understand how to behave and how to stabilize all their typical activities. So you're kind of managing in the eye of the storm at this point in time. And I would say this is where the majority of textbook learning tends to help people lead through a crisis. There's 6 things I'm going to cover, so just bear with me. But there's 6 steps, I think, during the stabilization phase that are really, really critical. And the first is all about communication. However much you communicated yesterday, you need to at least double it, maybe triple it. I think at Caribou, we probably quintupled the amount of communication we had going out. At different times call for very different forms of communication. And we started to make ourselves extremely visible as a leadership team, very, very accessible. We've done a couple of things that have been very unprecedented, like weekly phone calls with all 300 of our general managers so that they can talk straight to the leadership team every Tuesday afternoon. And then every Friday, I've had a video chat just like this with the entire support center or headquarters team and all of our field leaders, our district managers and above, with open Q&A to just have a dialogue and talk. And it's been really, really critical. So we talked early on, I think it was probably day 1 of calling a crisis a crisis. The very first day we felt the sales impact. And we said, okay, guys, time to over communicate. And even if the communication of the day is, there's really no update, then at least people are still hearing from the leaders that they depend on every day to get their information and know if they should feel okay, that, okay, not much has changed in the last 24 hours. And sometimes, it's pages of updates, but either way, communicate more. Because of COVID, I'll tell you, I've learned a new lesson. So next time I talk about communication, there's going to be an addendum, which is, we had a very small group of, well, not a very small, we had a small group of people early on that I bumped into in one of our coffee shops. It was about a week into this whole thing. And I was talking to a couple of these baristas and I said, hey, how you doing? And they were asking me questions about things that we had just communicated 5 or 6 days before. And I was thinking, well, that's really weird. And I went to the next coffee shop and I got a couple more questions of things we had already communicated. A couple days later, a petition starts at Caribou. This is a couple days into the crisis. And they're asking for things that we either already had or that we've already communicated we would be providing soon, or as soon as we could anyway, like face protection. And ultimately that spooled up and some of them protested this last Monday at one of our stores. And what we couldn't figure out is, why is this group of people, why are we hearing people asking us questions about things that we've already talked about? And what we realized is we had a gap in tools and processes where communication, the way that we had communicated in our company for the last, call it 28 years, wasn't good enough during crisis mode, where the information is changing so rapidly that it just wasn't enough. So while we were communicating to everyone that had an email address, but Caribou, that goes only down to the general manager level of a coffee shop, so the person that runs each store. We communicated to them constantly, and everyone else in the company. But if you're someone that works 8 or 20 hours a week, and you work maybe 1 or 2 days a week, the way that we typically relied on information to flow to that team is from the general manager down. And it's kind of a game of telephone. Or we ask them to go and pull information off of our intranet site. Gap. And that gap left people scared in some cases and frustrated. And once you lose people and break trust, gosh, you know how hard it is to gain that back. You know, trust is obviously so important to everybody. So, you know, one of the things that we had to do quickly, and it took us probably 2 weeks into the crisis to figure out, how do we communicate to thousands of people for whom we don't have a communication mechanism. So we had to pull together as a team and rethink it and do it really quickly. So it's been better for the last 2 weeks, but it's still not perfect. So, you know, it's frequency of communication. And then I guess one of the things that I've learned now, probably more than ever, is just making sure that there's a clear assessment of tools, processes, and systems likely, in order to make sure people are seeing it and the way that they want to absorb the communication, which typically today is on your device, and we don't have an answer for that. Regardless, we did a lot of new things, and most of them are really working well, and we'll probably keep some of them after this whole crisis is done. Every Friday for the last 3 years when I joined Caribou, we started a thing on Friday mornings called Joe with John. It's just a cup of Joe, and it's just me and anyone who wants to come for an hour. Anyone in the company is welcome to join, and it's an in-person stand-up type of meeting at the headquarters, our support center. And I love that time. It was my favorite time of the week because I got to just go and be with the team, and we got to, you know, celebrate all the great things going on, but also if something wasn't working, then there's a clear access to the CEO to say, hey, this thing, I'm not happy with it. What's going on? What are we doing about that? And it was a really easy way to keep a pulse on what's taking place in the company. And when we had to close the support center down a month ago, we lost that, but we pivoted to an afternoon video conference with everyone. But it's obviously not the same when you have hundreds of people on a video conference versus you know, in person. But anyway, you know, whatever it takes to communicate like crazy. Secondly, love people, stay really focused on their ever-changing needs, your team, your guests, what they needed yesterday might not be what they need now. Everyone feels really secure in routine, and crisis is a routine breaker. And you kind of have to try and figure out, what are the new routines right now? What do you need from us? You know, as a team, beyond communication, what new types of support might you need? You think about the changes that we've made in the last 5 weeks for like safety and well-being, for example. Installing plexiglass dividers in between baristas and guests when they place their orders. All new tools for curbside delivery. We've never had curbside before in our company. Certain types of protection like gloves and face protection, you know, all these things, it goes on and on and on. There's probably 100 things we've got to change in 5 or 6 weeks. But it's only through listening and making sure we're really, really clear on what the needs are of each of our core constituents that we can define how to continue to demonstrate that we're loving our team and loving our guests and keeping them safe, secure, and happy. Third in this phase, if at all possible, you have to try and create a purposeful mission to navigate the crisis, and try and define some new success metrics around what that might look like. If you think about, so Caribou's typical purpose statement, or it's always our purpose statement, it's now more than ever, is to create day-making experiences that spark a chain reaction of good. And we know what that means for us and how that drives our behaviors in a typical week, week in and week out. But what does it mean now? What does it mean when 60 of our stores are closed? What does it mean when we have less customers to serve? Well, for us, it meant we had an opportunity to continue to make people's days, continue to have an exceptionally positive impact on our community, but it might look different. We actually bought a food truck not too long ago and converted it to something that we've now, for the last 5 weeks, every day delivered canteens of coffee to first responders or those who are supporting first responders, like daycare centers. And that's a different way to fulfill our purpose statement that really wasn't around before. So we tried to define that and help people understand that whatever our KPIs, our key performance indicators, we all knew what they were day in and day out. They're different now. And one of them is how we give to fulfill our purpose. Fourth, innovate. Try new things like crazy. While you've probably already, in the middle of a crisis, de-scoped a lot of work to try and create clarity around what actually needs the most attention. Sorry, my daughter's trying to FaceTime me. She's obviously not participating in this. Busted. So, while you've probably tried to narrow down focus, you have to try and extract a little bandwidth to try new things. And innovate, because the risk of failure is probably at an all-time low during the middle of a crisis. Either you expend some energy that didn't pay off, or you spend some dollars that maybe they don't pay back. You're going to learn a tremendous amount, but you're probably having to find solutions to problems you didn't even know existed when you wrote your annual plan, for example. So try a lot of new things. Well, maybe not a lot, but try a few new things that might matter the most, and help the team understand why you decided to invest some innovation energy around those few things. Fifth, in this stage, your actions need to highlight your core values. Don't abandon them. I've seen a lot of people, when the going gets tough, your back's up against the wall, suddenly they become very different people. Organizations shift their purpose completely to do something different. And it's unfortunate, because to me, your true colors really emerge when you're under duress. It's one of the good things, I think, that really comes from crisis, is you now know exactly what you have in your company and from those who are around you. So are they exhibiting your typical core values? Are you looking at evidence that demonstrates that they understand how important they are and how they know they need to behave? One of our core values at Caribou is to support one another. And when we paused and we said, okay, well, how does this core value come to life right now? It's what drove a lot of that team prioritization as our number one priority. To say, okay, within our team, we know that one of the most important jobs in all of Caribou Coffee, more important than mine, are all of the people that run our coffee shops. The people that are the general managers of a Caribou Coffee. Why? Because they're usually working every day at a Caribou. They attract all the talent. People don't come in and see me every day. They come in and see the team that these general managers have developed and hired. I don't serve people every day. They serve people every day. So we felt like making sure that our values came to life to support our guests, our communities, and our teams would be really critical, because we want to be one of the brands that people look back on 6 months from now and say, wow, Caribou really stood up and helped. They were part of the solution when everything was so chaotic and different in life. And so that's one of the things I look for, is, are you living your core values in the middle of a crisis? And then last, when you're in the eye of the storm, this one's very difficult, but you have to take care of yourself physically. You have to take care of yourself spiritually. But it means trying to find a disciplined regimen for sleep, for eating really healthy, taking time to exercise. And sometimes people feel guilty about this. So like, I can't believe I'm going for a run when, XYZ is happening. I can't believe I just paused to eat instead of just slamming an energy drink or a cup of coffee or an espresso or something. You have to. You won't be at your best for anyone around you if you're not finding ways to take care of yourself physically and spiritually.
Yeah.
So those are the 6 things I start to think through in the heat of the battle. If you can do those things, you're probably managing the crisis as effectively as you can.
Yeah, thank you for that, especially on that last one as well, because we can only be as good as we are within, as we share with the world and with the challenges ahead of us, out of that which we are. Just let me summarize those 6, because those are gold if you might have missed those.
Before you do, I was just going to say, one of the things, Brian, that's actually been helping me a lot with number 6 is how prepared Westwood has been digitally, so that I can still I can still participate in church, but do it potentially on a different timeline. Mm-hmm. I think I told you this last Sunday, I was on the phone with a reporter at 8 o'clock in the morning. My day was very disrupted with working with my team and supporting people. But Julie and I found an hour in the afternoon to worship. And it was critical to my ability to make it through that weekend and start a new week. So the digital tools available to us through Westwood, I think, are an exceptional way to manage through your own time that gets so disrupted, but still stay connected when you need it spiritually. This would not have been available. Think of it 3 years ago. Right. It wouldn't have been like that. So I just wanted to highlight that here before you recap.
Yeah, there's been a lot of prep in there, and I may sum up at the end of our time just some of those things that are available, because they've helped me, they've helped you, and they've helped me
for sure,
and compass this well. But so those 6 things: communicate, increase your communication. 2nd, love people, love that. Their needs are different in crisis. 3rd, have a purposeful mission that guides you. 4th, innovate, try new things like crazy. 5, the actions highlight core values. Don't abandon those core values. And then 6, take care of yourself. That's really, really good. John, if I might just maybe interrupt a little bit of our planned process here to interact with some of the questions that have come in, that'd be great. Let me just start with this one. So one came in. It says, first, thank you for staying open. We visit the Shorewood location daily. So the question is, what is a lesson or learning you have gained through this time that you will continue with your team as we exit this crisis?
Well, one of the things for sure is around that communication tools and processes, and finding new ways to stay engaged with your team. And so that's a lesson that I've learned so many times throughout my career, is nothing replaces just making yourself available to people. And I couldn't figure out early in my life why it felt safer for some people to send an email and not open themselves up than it did to just show up and talk. And I quickly found out why. It's uncomfortable. But I learned as well that you're never going to push yourself or your organization as fast or as far as it should go if you hide. You can't hide. And I know when I first came to Caribou, for example, people didn't know me at all. I was an outsider. And for those of you who know me well, you know that trust is one of the most important things for me, because without trust, you have no relationship. And without relationships, you don't have a team. And it took a while to build some trust, because I'm also a pretty direct and honest person, believing that to build trust, we have to be honest with each other. And I remember coming in and people would say, hey, what do you think of XYZ? And I'd say, boy, I think we could do a lot better. And they're like, what? We're really proud of that. I'm like, well, I'm just being honest. By the way, I think this thing looks amazing. You didn't even ask me about that one. And so I remember feeling, okay, I know I hurt some feelings, did not intend to do that. But I'm going to make myself available because there are people that are confused. There are people that don't understand what's happening. What are the priorities? I'm just going to make myself available every hour. You can always email me. You can always stop me in the hall. But I will tell you, as long as people show up, I'll be there at 8:30 in the morning on Friday. I'm going to buy you a coffee. And if I don't know the answer, I'll just tell you I don't know the answer. But you have to be comfortable knowing that I'm not going to know everything. So I think that availability and accessibility is so important, and it might look different over time. And I'll just say quickly, the second thing that has been reinforced throughout this whole health crisis is the importance of empowering your team. And I've always done that. And again, sometimes I'd say I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. I have such high standards that sometimes I just want to do it myself. And it's uncomfortable to let others do it for you, or do it on behalf of you, or do it on behalf of the brand. But I have probably the best single group of leaders surrounding me that I've ever had in my life. They're outstanding. I don't worry about anything because I know that we've got each other's backs, and they're better at me than their jobs. And there were a lot of times where I felt like, okay, do I need to step in and do that? No, I wouldn't normally. So why would I do it now? And so I think just reinforcing, if you can establish a culture of trust and empowerment, then don't stop it during the middle of a crisis.
Good, thank you. Let's go to a couple others, and then, man, we're running out of time. This is just fun.
I usually talk too much. 8:37, holy cow.
Okay, time flies when you're having fun. The question comes in, let's say you have a great strategy, but aspects of it are new and just in the early stages of gaining acceptance and traction. Then the COVID-19 crisis hits, and it is really stressing the culture. Given that culture eats strategy for lunch, what are ways that we can build and support culture?
Oh, I love that question. It's so good. I think that's a great question for your team to ask, what types of support they need. But when I think about culture, I think about all those things about being yourself, creating complete accessibility, honesty and transparency, setting goals together, having a purpose that's way bigger than making money. That's why at Caribou, we don't talk too much about profit. We are a for-profit organization, don't get me wrong, but we talk about impact and we talk about doing good. And in fact, I ripped off Pastor Joel's Here, Near, and Far from the Westwood mission. And it's those components of culture that create stickiness, where that'll help people rally, because most people don't really care about some of the other things that a business might care about. We had the exact thing you described at Caribou. We had a brand new initiative that had just launched, actually 2 brand new initiatives within 5 weeks, both of which we view as really critical to our longer term success. We actually took this opportunity to pressure test it and say, well, okay, if this initiative is going to be good, if it's good under crisis and duress, it's going to be great normally. So what else do we have to do right this second to tweak this and make it even more effective than it was just back in February, when life seemed so normal and simple? Mm-hmm. So I think if you can look under today's filters and make that new initiative successful, it's going to be even stronger for the long haul.
Thank you. One more here. In the middle of the COVID-19 crisis, are there new or effective things that Caribou has done to strengthen and encourage morale for team members during the crisis? You talk about communication, that's a big one. But what else might be there?
I think for the morale piece, for us, it was about unlocking their desire to make an impact. Our brand attracts people that want to make a difference. And it's one of the things that I feel so privileged to be a part of. And when we talked about morale, they want to support each other, but baristas love their guests. they love them. They can't wait. It's why they get out of bed in the morning, is they can't wait to see the guests that are coming through the door. And one of the top questions that we started to hear early on from guests is, hey, Caribou, how can I help support your team? And how can I help support the community? Is there anything I can do? And I just love Minnesotans. I love Caribou's guests for that very reason. And then our team started to say, hey, how can we help the community? And we actually asked our team, what are some ideas that you can think of that would make you, that would maximize our impact? And it's what led to some policy changes to say, okay, why don't we just let every single store, instead of centralizing giving, let's let every coffee shop around the country do it themselves.
Wow.
Go take canteens of coffee and a bunch of cups to whoever you think needs it most in your community, and do it every single week. So one of those KPIs that I was talking about that might be different than normal was, we didn't have this canteen giving program 5 weeks ago. And now we're actually looking to see, are you doing it? And if not, why not? So that type of unity, I think, really builds morale, because we're not going to make money this month. We're definitely not going to make money last month. It's a very difficult time because we prioritized trying to keep as many people employed throughout this as we possibly could. We furloughed, I think, 68 people out of 7,000. And we certainly had to reduce a lot of hours. But our goal was to not be part of the unemployment crisis, because I think this is a health crisis that will quickly move into a mental health crisis that will move into a financial crisis. And just a party of one from someone who doesn't like to predict too much, but this isn't going away anytime soon. And so we have to continue to find ways to support each other that are sustainable.
Yeah, good. Thank you. One more, and then I'll ask my last question, and then we'll conclude. But
great.
For you in your leadership as a corporate leader, has the COVID-19 crisis given you more of an opportunity to be open about your faith and trust in the Lord? And really, maybe broader stroke, we'll go back up a layer there. How does your faith influence you through what you do for your job?
Well, I think there's no division between faith and behavior. And as a leader of a company that is not my company, I don't own this company. There's some. I have to be a little bit careful. One of our core values at Caribou is to be yourself, and we have a lot of people who have values that are different than my own, and that's okay, because that's a company value. And so if you can't show up to work and be okay with someone being different than you, that has a different belief system, then this might not be the place for you. But I never compromise my personal values, which are steeped in faith. And I think God puts us all in different positions so that for different reasons, and I still don't know all the reasons I'm in this role yet. But some of you know, I've talked to you about it, but one of our biggest franchisees is overseas, and he runs 300 Caribous, and he's Muslim. His name is Hamid. He's an outstanding human being. And I'd say it was probably within an hour that we started to have faith conversations, and I found them riveting. I love this man like he's my own brother, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. I think that we can each come into these situations with different goals, and my goal is to try and let God shine through me and through actions, not necessarily through every single thing that I say.
Thanks, John. Last one. Okay, so in Minnesota and for most of our nation, this is week 7. I mean, it kind of feels like it's day 5,030. And it's likely that some who are listening to this in leadership are starting to maybe emerge into a new phase. And you've talked about the different chapters, but as you've said, the storm is far from over. But when those clouds maybe begin to clear a little bit and you start to orient yourself to what's ahead, what can we do to maximize a crisis's impact for our organizations, families, whatever it is that we lead, as we return maybe to the new normal, if you will?
Yeah, so when I think about going into that final phase, I think of it as recovery. And it's hard to define when is the eye of the storm moving past you and when are we entering into this new phase of recovery. But there's four things I try and think through as it looks like pace is starting to normalize. And you hear NFL players about, they say the game is starting to slow down for me. Well, it's not that the game is physically getting any slower. It's just their understanding of the game has increased, and now they can make decisions in real time so much more effectively. And so for me, once that starts to happen, which for me was about 10 days ago in this crisis, I feel like I was in that middle phase for about 4 weeks with my team where we were working 20-hour days just trying to make sure that our teams have everything that they needed. And a few days ago, in the beginning of last week, I woke up and I just had this different clarity for what was taking place and how this was going to be shifting. And so there's four things. And the first one is to keep your eyes peeled for all the good that came from this crisis and it is currently taking place. So one of the things I look for is what new capabilities did we just develop that could be leveraged for the future? So you think about, for us, we're looking at communication, but another one is curbside delivery. We had guests a year and a half ago. It was on our radar. We had a lot of moms in particular say, hey, Caribou, if you don't have a drive-through, like Shorewood's a great example. At Shorewood, there's no drive-through. Can you just bring my order out to my car for me? Because I don't want to get my kids out of their car seats in the middle of January. And we thought, well, that's a great idea, but we just, with our whole list of priorities, that one was going to take too much to unlock. And well, in the middle of a crisis, we developed a version of Curbside in 6 days. That included app development, operations development, a completely new retrained behavior that was born from the crisis that it's probably never going to go away now. And so it was designed to get through this crisis to keep people socially distanced. But it was, I think it'll be leveraged and built and used for different capabilities and reasons down the road. And on that same thing with what's good, who on your team is stepping up in ways you never thought possible? I mean, every team has starters and bench players. And you might have some starters that are now benched because they just crumbled under pressure and they didn't support each other and they didn't behave by demonstrating core values. And you have some bench players that might just knock your socks off. And so I think it's a great time to reassess your team and the overall capabilities that you have. So that's step one, look for the good that's taking place. Second, bury the bad. Churchill is very famous for saying, never waste a good crisis. Every single aspect of your business should be assessed using filters about what tomorrow's business is going to need. If your company isn't prepared for tomorrow's needs, then change them now. If there's something about your business that has been bothering you, that either hasn't been working, it's been fledgling, it's been draining money. If you run a nonprofit organization and there's a partner that's just really not been that good, now's the time. Cut ties with anything that doesn't at least have pretty consistent synergy with where you think your business or your organization is going to need to go tomorrow. So bury the bad. 3, provide hope for the future. Faith, hope, love, Brian. But take a stab at defining whatever the new normal might be, and help everyone around you understand that there was a crisis. We talked about it. We managed the crisis. Here's what we learned from it, because each of us is going to continue to learn new things throughout our journeys. But you know what? We learned a lot, and we're going to leverage a lot for good. And here's how that's going to be used for the future as our organization progresses and moves on, and we can start to define a new normal. New normal is something that none of us understands yet. Like what impact will COVID have on all of us long term? We don't totally know. Think about airline travel back in pre-2001, before 9/11 and post. airline travel changed probably for the rest of our lives because of what occurred. This disruption will create some other long-standing new normals for us, but helping your team understand that can be really good, and providing hope coming out of this crisis is really important. And then lastly, recap. Memorialize the learnings, because you never know what could be used for the next crisis and when that one might arise too.
Yeah. Can you give us a quick tip on how you personally recap? I would imagine that your pace is pretty high right now. You've already mentioned that. But what disciplines do you employ to help recap so that you don't miss the learning?
Literally pull people together and say, what did we learn from this, and document it. Create a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet. People call them postmortems or recap sessions or whatever they are, but it's just trying to really take a moment. And it is hard to find a moment for all of us, because I don't care who you are, your life is busy. During a crisis or after a crisis, your life is probably busier than ever. But you need to pause and say, what happened? What did we really learn about ourselves throughout this as people, as a team, as an organization? What can the next group of leaders who face something similar learn from us so that they can start on square 5 instead of square 1? And it really, I think of it mainly as a discussion and then a written recap.
Yeah, good. I think that's a great segue to just give us all really a challenge tonight. First of all, John, thank you so much for your insight. This was so great. I've got so much writing down here in my paper, and I'm really glad that you recorded so that I can go back and watch this and absorb all the things that you shared, because it's such really, really helpful wisdom. I want to give just an encouragement to those of us who are watching tonight. Before you move on to what's next, take a moment and record. Just that last kind of challenge that John gave us. Take a minute and record. What's something or 2 things that you would want to begin to implement in your life, starting maybe even tonight, but especially tomorrow, that you can gain from this conversation and really begin to live out. Maybe you've got kids to put to bed. Maybe you've got other things to do tonight. That's okay. Just take 5 minutes, write down some words, let those words sit, and come back to them tomorrow morning. And then also just want to encourage you, especially around that take care of yourself piece that John mentioned. That's really what we're here for. We want to help. We want to provide meaning. We want to provide an avenue where God can speak to us and remind us of our value and remind us that he's holding the whole world together. So if you're new to Westwood, we want to just invite you back. We want to invite you to come to a couple more webinars that we have. We've got one on May 13th and then 2 weeks after that. But also we have weekly worship gatherings on Sunday. And then every day there's something out on our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter feeds that we hope will encourage you. So go check that out if it's meaningful for you. But yes, come back. We're so glad that you're here. You'll get an email with links to this recording, especially if you weren't able to capture everything, and you can share that as well. But again, thank you for coming tonight. We're so grateful that you have carved out time, and we hope that this conversation has been valuable for you. And one last time, John, thanks again for you being here as well.
You bet, Brian.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.